Okay, good morning to everybody. Thanks for attending this webinar by Infrachain. So I'll start with some housekeeping information before giving the floor to the chairman of Infrachain, Fabrice Croiseau. So please make sure to keep your microphones muted at all times, except of course for the speakers, and I may use actually the mute all functions. So for the speakers, please make sure that when you are taking the floor or taking the screen, that your mic is on when you want to speak. Please also do not share your screen unless you're requested to do so. And regarding questions, so we will have time for questions at the end of the panel, and you will be able to add your questions in the chat. I also want to draw your attention to the fact that this webinar will be recorded and the recording may be published online. So if you do not wish to appear in the recording, you may choose simply to switch off your camera. You may also use the rename option or simply leave the meeting, which of course we do not hope that you do. And with this, I hand over to Fabrice Croiseau. Fabrice, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Tom, and good morning to everybody, and welcome to this webinar. We should be around a little less than 100 people participants, which it's fine. It's a success for us. Today we'll have the chance to get very useful and concrete insight from actors for the public sector about how blockchain technology can transform public services. So this webinar is organized by Infrachain. I have the chance to be chairman of Infrachain. For those of you who don't know Infrachain is a public-private partnership, and we are actually a non-profit organization, a blockchain community, and committed to create an on-top governance framework to allow a blockchain application to become operational in the current regulatory environment. We are a member of INETBA, which is an international association for trusted blockchain application, and also involved in EBSI, the Open Blockchain Service Infrastructure, currently working on operating the first Luxembourg national EBSI node. We are, or were, because the working group has stopped a few weeks ago, a member of the EOCD's blockchain export policy groups to advise OECD about blockchain recommendation. This webinar, as you probably know, is organized as part of the Token project. Token is a project founded by the European Union, the Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Program. It's a consortium of 11 partners from 8 different European countries. Our objective is to easy adoption of decentralized ledger technologies, blockchain, as drivers for to have more open, transparent, and trusted public services. The project has started beginning of this year, and it should last 3 years. But Tom, just after doing his talk, will provide us more in-depth information about the project itself. So this webinar is the national launch of Token in Luxembourg. The event here is organized as a webinar, and so we have many participants from other Euro and also some non-European countries. We welcome you all, and we also hope that because you can join the Token community even without being part of the consortium, so we hope that all of you, most of you, will be able to join the Token community. So the event is in English because we have a multiple nationality here, and we are a very international country. Many languages spoken here in Luxembourg, so we prefer to hold this kind of event in English. I hope it's fine for everybody. The program, you already have a look at it probably. We will start with 2 keynotes. The first one from Peter Ziggy, who is head of unit of digital innovation and blockchain for the European Commission. And the second one from Carlucci, who is director at Ziggy. Ziggy is
join the meeting.
International, intercommunal, IT management syndicate, who is in charge of the IT the information system of most of the commune here, of the city here in Luxembourg, except the capital, Luxembourgville. And they're using blockchain and for the next generation of their platform. So I will come back at the end of this webinar. Thank you again to all of you, and I will can now give the floor to Peteres Ziggalvis.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invitation to address you all today. I mean, as it was said, Luxembourg and Infrachain are inextricably involved and implicated in the European Union's public services blockchain initiative. We very much welcome their very strong cooperation in INATBA and in the European blockchain services infrastructure, one of the first nodes, and we're going towards nodes in all 29 countries. But I'll give you a little bit the landscape and the overall strategy that is behind this quest for, how to say, continuation of Europe being a global leader in blockchain. I say a global leader because, of course, alongside China and North America, but we think that in blockchain we are doing very well, and especially in the public services. You can say that our strategy, our approach starts first of all with knowledge and mapping. This is the EU Blockchain Observatory and Forum. It finished its first 2-year mandate, and you have a book concluding these 2 years with also articles by Roberto Viola, my Director General, and Eva Kiley, a very prominent MEP on innovation issues, and one by myself, along with a lot of other interesting reflections drawn from the first 2 years of the Blockchain Observatory and Forum. It's issued multiple reports on the general data protection regulation and blockchain, innovation in blockchain, financial services in blockchain, EID and blockchain. So very much to do with the public services and how this particular technology, which is of course not at all the only one and not the only technology we're tied to for the public services, but which we think can be a very justified one in many use cases, especially where you need to share data from a whole different set of actors. So we're now into the second 2-year mandate of the Blockchain Observatory and Forum. There'll be a first workshop of the new one coming up in September on central bank digital currencies with the European Central Bank, Bank of Japan, we hope the Bank of International Settlements as well, and Bank of Canada we hope as well. So some very stellar participants. And like all the other workshops, they're open for everyone to register, and especially now that they're virtual, they're perhaps easier to attend for everyone from across the globe. The videos are online afterwards, and as well the reports. So I encourage you to take a look at that website. If you're not on the mapping, if your blockchain initiative isn't there, make sure that you send in information and you get there. Then we have the European Blockchain Partnership, 29 countries, all 27 EU member states, Norway and Liechtenstein, working together to build the European blockchain services infrastructure, which was already mentioned. And Luxembourg and Infrachain are vital partners there, setting up a node already. And something that's important to outline that this is not piloting, this is deployment. We're going to deploy the use cases, and these are all public service use cases for the moment. The declaration of the European Blockchain Partnership has the possibility of a public-private partnership, so also with private companies. This hasn't started yet, but the main reason for it existing is to better provide public services. We're justified. We're not carried away about the hype. We don't think blockchain is a silver bullet solving everything, but we do think, again, where you have a diverse group of participants who don't want to share the same or can't share the same database, that it is a very effective technology. So in this case, we see RegTech, tax reporting, we see diploma certification and sharing, we see self-sovereign identity, which is also a necessity for a lot of the other use cases in the public service, very much complementary and working on the base of EIDS on the government IDs, so not to replace them. This isn't the idea, but where you don't need a formal ID, you can have a broader identity, and making sure that this is not dominated by some one commercial player, but that is really in the hands of the citizen controlling his or her identity. I mean, this is a fundamental right. If you link it to the data protection, which it obviously is very closely linked to, but it's also, I mean, just a way to really enable your own self-determination. Looking forward, we also are collaborating with the International Association of Trust and Blockchain Applications, which was mentioned. These are the stakeholders, but it also has a governmental advisory body where I am European Commission is, and I'm certainly not the European Commission, but my institution is, and at least I've been working in that up until now. And also the Government of Canada, the World Bank, a lot of global players. And I mean, I think the European Blockchain Partnership and Luxembourg are going to be becoming even more active there in the upcoming meetings. So we really want to work with the stakeholders in that area in the time that's coming up very soon. And then looking forward, we also need to have a innovation-friendly legal framework. So a lot of you were aware of the digital assets, the crypto assets public consultation, which is closed. And now with the colleagues in DG FISMA, we are looking at a possible legislative instrument, which could be adopted in the autumn, of course, if the College of Commissioners, the political leadership of the Commission, decides to adopt it, which would aim to enable the use of tokenization and investment in payments, in decentralized systems, utility, consumer uses, with appropriate levels of regulation, but most of all with a philosophy to make sure that these types of applications on the blockchain can be utilized in Europe and utilized in a way that's obviously safe for the consumer and for the investor, but most of all to really enable innovation. Next, we have the Digital Services Act public consultation open right now. There is a chapter on smart contracts. Is the current legal landscape one that enables them to be used across the entire European Union, or are there issues with fragmentation, different ways of interpreting whether it's a legal contract or not? Are there big problems which necessitate action by the European Commission? And something that I can underline, if it was ever true that if it moves, the European Commission regulates it, it's not now. Myself and some other colleagues have been following blockchain, and originally in a fintech context as early as 2012, 2013, with how to say a great deal of attention. And up until now, we've let the technology develop and the market develop, and not the political leadership. It's not us taking the final decisions in the civil service, but really taking an approach that we want this market to develop in Europe, and we want to see where there are issues. Some things like money laundering and fraud are just prohibited. Putting it on a different technology doesn't free you from those requirements to not how to say defraud or launder money. But other questions, as I mentioned, the applications like smart contracts and tokens are perhaps different in ways from other digital representations and have more potential. That's exactly, again, we want to help you, the entrepreneurial community and the public service community, to realize this potential. And when we look back at the European blockchain services infrastructure, you could say as well that that is working like a regulatory sandbox, because the member states, Luxembourg and others, and us are entering into an area where the use of DLT or blockchain is not prohibited, but also it's not set out in legislation, which is logical and good. We're technology neutral in relation to legislation. We don't have a regulation on transistors. We don't have a regulation on servers. An exception will be probably the artificial intelligence, exactly because the extreme levels of both potential and a potential downside, if it is all taken in a, how to say, anti-human direction that technology takes. So, I mean, most of you are aware we had the public consultation on the artificial intelligence, and then a legislative initiative will be probably coming early next year. And looking back again at this regulatory sandbox approach, we will probably expand it to look at other fintech and blockchain applications that could be used in the public service, or where you could deliver clarity for the private sector, where again, we're not going to be adopting a mass of laws on a technology that will develop and progress. So where you have the vital issues addressed, then you can utilize the tools of proportionality and discussion and dialogue between regulators and the regulated, something we also did with the FinTech Lab, which was something that came out of the FinTech Action Plan. And there we met with cybersecurity, with EID, with artificial intelligence service providers, together with all the member state supervisors. And the regulatory dialogue helped both to identify what the real risks are, as well as improve the uptake. So that's something that we definitely want to do. You can say that uptake of the cutting edge digital technologies in the public sector for the benefit of our citizens. Again, always taking a holistic citizen-centered perspective, and at the same time ensuring a high level of cybersecurity, privacy, and cybersecurity built in from the very beginning. Industrial policy as well, because the idea is we're obviously an open market and open to the world, and we're staying that way, but we also want to develop European choices. More competition is better. And in the spirit of technology autonomy and technology sovereignty, this doesn't mean closing the market, but it does mean making sure that there are also providers based in Europe. So also industrial policy, making sure that there's opportunities for our European blockchain and other technology providers to sell their services by public procurement, innovation procurement on the private market. So this is something that is also very much one of our concerns. And then closing perhaps with the international perspective. We have close cooperation, you could say, especially with Canada and Japan. The coronavirus crisis a little bit slowed down some of the actions there on perhaps dialogue beginning on the European blockchain services infrastructure, linking eventually, after it's deployed between the member states, with some services in other countries. But this is something that as well, we think that blockchain, smart contracts, tokens, etc., have the potential to move seamlessly across the world. So you do have differences. We have requirements like the General Data Protection Regulation. We're also very serious about the EU Green Deal. For us, the EU Green Deal equals Digital EU. So we want our blockchain solutions to be not only scalable, but to be sustainable in an energy consumption sense. Yes, this is perhaps an overview. So we want the applications to go across the world, but there perhaps may be differences on, for instance, GDPR and on the sustainability, which we hope everyone will agree with us on, but of course it's not for us to determine that. I see that there's a question. I saw it at the top of my screen and then it went away, and now I have found it. Could Peter share the links to the documents that he mentioned at the beginning of the result on the Observatory on Innovation on Blockchain? Actually, the easiest thing is just to go to the website. It's EU Blockchain Forum. I just put it into whichever search engine you utilize, and then you get all the documents. I can paste one out, and I'm happy to do that. But since there's such a richness of documents there on all kinds of subjects, as I said, EID, public services, etc. And I was referring to the final report, which you can also find in my Twitter feed if you want to follow me at P. Zilgalvis. So it's a possibility. And yeah, you can, as I said, you can find all of the documents there on the EU Blockchain Observatory and Forum's website. So those are perhaps my final comments. Again, the von der Leyen Commission, working under President von der Leyen, has two main priorities: digital transformation and the EU Green Deal, the green transformation. We think they go hand in hand. We think sustainable blockchain works in that direction as well. And we are really glad to be part of this community of the public services who are looking to utilize the justified and best technologies for implementing public services, and as well working with the private companies who are interested in these areas. We're also here to try to make sure that all types of blockchains, from permissioned distributed ledger tech to really decentralized blockchains, flourish in Europe, and this is a great place for your entrepreneurship.
Thank you very much, Peter, for this insight and this very interesting information about what the European Commission does around blockchain. I will now give the floor to Carlo, who will present us how the next generation of the Ziggy platform will use blockchain and why.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Fabrice, for the honor to inviting me. Thank you very much also to the colleagues from the Ministry of Digitalization in Luxembourg and Government IT. This is a project we were beginning together and we will keep on doing together. Who is Ziggy? Ziggy is a public administration belonging to 102 municipalities in Luxembourg. And we are doing the IT for these municipalities. Also, for example, kindergarten, childcare, other organizations as ours and social offices making approximately, sorry for my English, 600-700 administrations we are working for. Ziggy is standing for 38 years of existence. So we have been created in '82. We're having 44 actual solutions provided to our customers or bosses. It's the same thing for us. And we are covering 600,000, roughly 600,000 citizens benefiting from our services. What are we working, or what are we focusing on? So Ziggy is focusing on all the communal or municipal missions. Examples given are administration, territory development, water management, waste management, tourism, sports, etc., etc. So we are really trying to cover the entire business of the municipalities and giving an integrated solution for them. We are more or less 100, we are a small team, so we are only 140 people working on this topic. So Fabrice, I think he invited me because he knew that we were trying to integrate the blockchain concept into our next generation platform. So we were working the last 2 years on a new low coding platform to increase time to market for our customers. Since we knew that it was really times were picking up speed, and we needed to comply with that. And we wanted to give business integration to our customers, also to have a business dialogue with them and to be able to be more user-friendly and giving them more ease of use. We had with this project, we call it Ziggy Nova. It's our platform Ziggy Nova. We have with this project five goals. So the first is bring easy process creation to business. So it's a low-code platform, as I said. We created an own language in which we are developing code for our customers. Integration, so we try to cover horizontal processes. As I when I look to my past experience, the last 15 years, I saw that administrative simplification was solely a legal process. So integrating legal framework so that the simplification could take place. I did not always see a process integration. Process integration is really hard to do between administrations, and so we're trying to give this process integration a chance this time, and also integrate all the administrations, so municipalities, government in projects, citizens, civil servants, mayors, all these councils, etc. One of our focuses was also to integrate an DLT technology to have a trusted third party in the product, integrated in the product, and this on a general base. So we didn't want to develop a product on top of the DLT or the blockchain. We wanted really to take it as integral part of our new platform and give access to this technology, providing a proof and authenticity of the transactions and the documents to all our customers and to all the domains we are providing solutions to. One big point was in this matter also the social interaction. We designed a platform that the people involved in a process are in one frame and can work together until the process is finished. When I'm going to the next topic, is the concept we were changing in the product itself, that the user was focusing on his needs and executing his needs, and then was requesting a framework. We call it a règlement. It's a regulatory framework where we have our low coding platform, where we have enabled the coding of regulations and laws. So when we then executing the activities or the applications for new customers, for example, in other municipalities who have different set of regulations, we simply adopt the regulation to the new customers, and we do not have to change something to the basic solutions. And it is adapted so it's easily adapted to all sorts of customers. And we have several levels also of rules or regulations where we can script, let's take the term script, local laws, technical laws, but also municipality regulations or national laws. For example, for l'état civil, civil status, for civil management of the civil status. This meaning also that the platform in this case allows us to be much more flexible, much more to take much more speed, and next to the regulations and laws, we are also able to encode metrics at different levels, so that the platform is customizable at every level, also to give dashboard facilities to the users, political dashboard or executional dashboard or technical dashboard to the people. I was thinking about an example to tell you about an example. So since we all probably who are present here ask one time or the other for a building permit in our municipality, that's probably an example speaking to all of us, where naturally transparency, collaborative transactions, legal legal aspects are important. And what I want to stay here to say in this example is that it is the first example and first way we are going. So we did not want to have, and we do not want to have, any financial transactions on our platform. We do not want to have clear text on our platform. We only want to deposit proofs of our activity in our administrative resource planning platform. Since we are careful, we do not want the project to be too ambitious at the beginning. We want to have our tests ongoing and go step by step very carefully. This is the first step where we only depositing proofs of transactions, proof of signatures. Our ARP is requesting then to the blockchain if the document delivered is exact or is authentic or not. As I told you, our platform at the basis is integrating all the actors. In this case, it's the civil servant of the municipality, the mayor, the advisory board advising for the building permit, the ministry, and potentially, that in this case we did not integrate it, potentially even the design offices delivering building plans, etc. When the transaction is taking place, we are facing now we have having the civil servants encoding the request. This could also be done in a later stage from the citizen point of view from the citizen's point of view, where he could request a building permit electronically, but that has not been integrated yet. And today it's the civil servant who is encoding and making the legal checks. The legal checks for him are made easier because his requests are confronted to the regulational framework I just mentioned, and all the legal aspects are drawn from the regulational framework and integrated into the building permit, so that also the civil servant and the mayor and the advisory board can be sure that the request is compliant to the law. After the mayor is giving his approval, it's an electronic approval he is giving, the document is generated and a hash code or a proof is written to the blockchain. In parallel, we are generating a QR code. We are also printing on it that people can use with our government application, and people can use for, because the red point, so the building permit has to be put physically on the building place so people can read it. And so you can go with an app and request on this QR code every detail publicly, any detail for transparency, who generated it, who has approved it, what mayor has approved it, and so on, that the detail is transparently accessible to the citizen. So we think that first we delivering on top of our low coding platform. In this case, we are delivering a proof, so a legal proof. So since it's written in a public blockchain, we can also prove that this document has been officially generated. We can publish the document, and even if the document is revoked for one reason or the other, we can transparently give these answers through the QR code on the place, on the public place. It's a small application, but we are rather happy with it because it's integrating really a whole bunch of technologies. As I told you, we have been developing low coding platform, we have been developing social interaction platform, we have been integrating bigger platforms as blockchain to do it, and all together are now delivering this service. And it was a major step for us, since now following naturally after this opening in a lot of other applications. I would thank the audience for the time they took to listen to me, and I would like to ask Tom to launch a little video making a little wrap up of what I was saying. Thank you very much to everybody.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Carlucci, for your very interesting speech. A lot of insights. So we'll come now to my part. So now I have to start my presentation. Okay, there it is. So where are we? Okay, so yes, thank you to our two keynote speakers for their very insightful presentations. I think this was an excellent introduction to the topic of today. So it's the national launch event of Token, as you know, as you have seen. And so I have now the pleasure to provide you an overview of this project, which will then be followed by the presentation of one of the use cases that will be developed within the project. So my name is Tom Kettles. I'm the operation lead or project lead of Infrachain. And so I'm representing also Infrachain in the token project as the main coordinator on the Infrachain side. Together, actually, this is done with our partners from University of Luxemburg, the Interdisciplinary Center for Research, Reliability and Trust, together also with the Luxembourg Institute of Science and Technology. We have Intech, we have KYC3, we have iTrust Consulting, we have EY Luxembourg, actually, we have the Blockchain Academy, we have ScoreChain, and I hope that I didn't forget anybody. Sorry, yes, I did forget one, which is also Net Services, one of our members. So Infrachain is actually engaging in this project not alone, but together with some of its members, the members that I just mentioned. So the project is financed by the European Union's Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Program. I think you saw that by now. As Fabrice, our chairman, said, the project started in January this year, so it's still quite fresh, and it lasts for 3 years, so it will end in December 2020. And the project partners, the project partners. So who are they? I just mentioned the companies that are, or institutions that are engaging together in the project with Infrachain, but this is the Infrachain part. So the 11 official partners, let's say, are the ones that you see here. So we come from 8 different EU member states. It's a very diverse consortium. We have actually IT developers, we have research and technology organizations that are active in blockchain, IoT, big data platforms. We have public administrations that are directly member of the consortium. We have experts in public management, and we also have think tanks that are specialized in digital transformation and policy making and open commons business models. And then we have Infrachain, which is a blockchain association and also actually a blockchain ecosystem. Now the companies in detail, you see that it's the Firewire Foundation. They're from Berlin, Funding Box Research and Funding Box Accelerator. They are based in Denmark and Poland respectively. We have the Inter-University Microelectronics Centrum from Belgium, and they will present the use case just after my short speech. Then we have the Flemish Institute for Logistics, of course also from Belgium. From Greece, we have the Center for Research and Technology Hellas, represented by the Information Technologies Institute. And we also have the municipality of Caterini. And then we have from Spain, the University of Cantabria, based in Santander, and the municipality of Santander itself. So these are the different project partners of Token. And so what's the starting point? Let's see, what's the starting point of Token, of the project, and what are the pain points that actually the project wants to solve? Now, the observation that we can make is actually that there is a rapid transformation of our society, and the digital revolution, along also with budgetary pressures, they pose quite some challenges, but they also bring, of course, opportunities for governments and also for the future of public services in generally. And within Horizon 2020, there was a consultation on ICT-driven public sector innovation needs. So what are the innovation needs by the public sector? And out of this consultation, there came some ideas, and based on these ideas, basically the Token project was inspired. So the Token project aims basically so to provide enablers, very important. So it's providing enablers for the introduction of disruptive technologies that contribute then to accelerate the transformation of public services towards an open government model, which is based on the principle of collaboration, transparency, and participation. Yeah, so we see today actually, so public services generally are closed and centralized, which is true in various degrees across Europe. Some are more closed or centralized than others, depending always, of course, on the member state. So introducing DLTs, introducing distributed ledger technologies, introducing disruptive technologies like this in public services, that can really be seen as a paradigm shift. It's not just yet another technology, something, oh yes, we've seen that before. It's really something which is completely new, and this paradigm shift implies a change in both government but also institutional culture. So it's really about changing the culture, because public administrations, they need to adjust their internal processes. So as I said, it's not just a new technology that is applied to old problems and applied to the same situation, but really changing situations, so changing internal processes. It's about empowering civil servants, which I think in many cases is also something which is rather something new. And also facilitating approaches to co-creation. So co-creation, I think, in public services is not necessarily the norm today. It's rather going into one direction. With DLTs, this is a game changer. So it's a really co-creation there. It's not one direction, it's really bidirectional or multi-directional, rather, that the interactions they are. And so it's very important. I said it's about changing culture. So in order to make this effort really worthwhile, we need to make sure that all the actors, they are embracing this change. So they are changing the process. And you know that normally humans, they are resistant to change. So this is really one of the important aspects of Token, to make sure that this change is embraced. So there is also a but, so what needs to do before we get there? And this is where token comes in. So in order really to succeed in the adoption of disruptive technologies, public administrations, they need support and they need guidance, so to better understand the gains, but also the constraints that such technologies bring. I said it's a change of culture, so we cannot just simply apply it. We really need to provide this guidance, so to share experience based on existing already applications, so that public services feel at ease. There's of course also a skills issue, so we need to make sure that there is access to critical skills, but also to sandbox environments that may help them actually to assess the value proposition and also the potential impact of the technology uptake. And last but not least, so we see that there is quite some budgetary pressure, and I think now with the current COVID-19 situation in many, in all countries basically, and also the public aids that are made available, so this budgetary pressure really increases probably, and so there is definitely demand for a low-cost approach in the experimentation phase. And so this is where token comes in. So this is where it fits in, and yeah, question now, why use then DLTs and not another technology? Now, the token project basically is built on the firm belief that the DLTs, they are meant to face the challenges that face public services in their transformation. So some of the challenges that I already mentioned. So basically DLTs, distributed ledger technologies, they can lead to a transformation of the value chain, so really change processes, transform the value chain, but also transform the relationship between the different actors. So they are really able to deliver new solutions to complex problems that governments are facing today. And actually we can see that DLTs, they are the cornerstone of future innovation. They enable secure processes that will transform public services, and in turn they will solve issues related to trust, transparency, but also privacy. And especially in the public sector, we see that the DLTs, they have the potential to improve effectiveness, but also reduce bureaucratic barriers. Just to take one example, I think we all know the once only principle. So the principle that when you are in touch with an administration, you should only provide your information once, and then the next administration should be able to have access to that information. Now it's working more or less depending on where you go, but definitely with DLTs, there is much potential for this. There is also definitely potential to enhance the digital democracy and transparency, so you can in an easier way make available information and also active participation, and you can also foster automation through smart contracts, for instance, and this reduces of course the possibility of errors, human errors when encoding, for instance, but also it reduces the possibility of fraud, for instance. So these are really some of the main considerations for token. And so what's basically the mission then of token? What are we aiming for? So what we aim to do with token is, I've used this term already before, is the term of enablers. So token really aims to provide enablers for public agency to pilot the adoption of distributed ledger technologies. And so really important, it's to pilot. We're still considering this as a pilot phase for public services. So to use DLT as a pilot and as a driver for the transformation of public services, as I said, for having more open, more transparent, more trusted, and also more efficient services. And in this respect, so the token project will provide a sandbox for testing novel processes and also combining actually the best of not only distributed ledger technologies, but also other technologies, Internet of Things, big data, and cloud technologies, and this all together with the power of social tools that will also be used in the project, and this together, yeah, addressing the topics of security, privacy, data protection requirements, a very important point. So the token project really makes sure that also the use cases that are deployed are in line with data protection requirements, which is of course one of the big topics when we're talking about blockchain or DLTs in general. So these solutions that will be made available by token, they will be cost effective by providing these different tools that are readily available, these digital different enablers, and they also will foster accountability, so through more transparency. Now, more specifically, what are some of the items that we focus on in token? So concretely, actually, the token ecosystem will ease the adoption of DLT technologies by providing so public administrations with public service ready components so that can be readily used by public services. And so we definitely want to prove also the value of these public service ready components by providing replicable pioneer use cases. So we do not only develop tools, but we actually develop also use cases, pioneer use cases, as we call them. So to really make sure that the tools that are made available can be replicated in other use cases. And so what it's based on is the different components that you see here. So first of all, very important, it's a bottom-up approach. So there is really a strong implication of the stakeholders, namely civil servants in the first line. And we have already started, impact assessment. So we have already done in the first steps of the project, had some workshops, and we had already some findings. So the first findings actually that I can share with you, that is, for instance, that the opportunities that are perceived by the public sector, so by the civil servants, so we have asked them, what do you think are the opportunities of DLT? So some of the opportunities that were perceived are the efficiency, are the traceability of information, and also the security. And on the challenges side, so some of the challenges that were identified are the regulatory uncertainty, and I think also Carlucci already addressed this in its speech, and also the Commission, of course, is also following very closely the legal framework of this. Another challenge is the scalability of the solution, and also the high energy consumption, which is, I think, a general concern when speaking about DLTs. So these are already the initial findings that we will, of course, take into account when going further into the project and when addressing the other topics that you see here on the slide. So we have the different pillars that it's built on. So it's the decentralized architecture. That's, of course, the DLT. We actually take our inspiration, of course, also from EPSI. So we are following that closely. That's one of the main references. We are putting in place a sandbox infrastructure. I mentioned this before. This is very important to have such an infrastructure for having low-cost experimentation. And so we will also set up an experimental ecosystem. We are already doing this, and actually you are already kind of partner of this ecosystem, because public services, of course, they do not evolve in a vacuum. They are in interaction with a lot of stakeholders. So we build this ecosystem. We have a specific platform for that. I will mention that later. You can all join that platform. So to also have really a collaborative environment. And we are developing a toolkit for policymakers. So the objective is really to take the experience that we gain here, to put that in this toolkit, so that we have ready to use guidelines and recommendations for policymakers, and recommendations and guidelines, not only for the technical part, which is of course important, but I think for technical implementation, there is already a lot of documentation, not specifically maybe for the public sector. But what we also address in these guidelines and recommendations, it's also the cultural part, the socioeconomic part, and also the legal challenges. And I really insist on cultural and socioeconomic factors, because they are often forgotten, but they are also key to the success of a project, so when deploying new technologies. So the key benefits, I will pass on this a bit faster, because I've mentioned them already a few times. So it's the efficiency, it's the trustworthiness, it's the transparency, it's the privacy, it's the flexibility, and also the sustainability, the cost savviness of the project. So this is all brought by different choices that were made, for instance, regarding sustainability and also cost savviness. We are basing the technical approach a lot on the open commons approach, and so we really want to avoid vendor lock-in scenarios. For instance, trustworthiness, so it's definitely a privacy by design approach, so which is of course key when addressing this. I will move already to the next slide. So where are we with the project? What is planned? So what's the roadmap? Here you see the roadmap of the token project. So basically there are four prime phases. We are now mostly in phase 1 and 2. So it's the technology readiness and the effectiveness and impact assessment. So in the first phase, the technology readiness, what we are in the process of doing right now is to develop and to deliver the tools based on decentralized and distributed technologies on open source components. The second phase, it's the effectiveness and impact assessment. So I've mentioned already that we have initial findings, and so within the second phase also we have the 4 use cases, and I will present them on the next slide. Phase number 3, it's growing the ecosystem. So this actually we also started. It started with the initial conferences, webinars, that some of them more internal. It started also with communication process. So we have a platform that I will show you. It starts with this webinar. So you are all interested in the topic since you signed up for this webinar. So you will also be able actually to be part of the ecosystem. And the last phase, it's a very important one as well. It's the sustainability. So the project is funded for 3 years by Horizon 2020, but the project is not meant to stop after the 3 years, but the project is definitely meant to continue after that. And so to do that, we want to ensure actually the creation of an open commons business model and also a governance model, so that the token project can continue to fly independently, if I may say so, after the European funding, and really also so that the use cases, they are continued and also expanded once the European funding stops, and so that once the project can continue also by its own. So that's the 4 phase. So I will turn now to the use cases. So generally speaking, the use cases, so they are there to stimulate interaction, also experimentation and cross learning. So the objective of all the use cases is to make life easier for citizens. Of course, civil servants are those that we address directly, because they will need to use the tools and they will be the early adopters. But in the end, it's about making life easier for citizens. So for instance, by streamlining bureaucratic processes or like procurement processes, and also increasing transparency. So we want public services to become interoperable, and also citizens to regain more control basically of their data. Token is and the use cases, they are made in a modular way. So it's the modularity of services that are also important. So there are different building blocks that are developed that can then be used in the different use cases. Now, what are the 4 use cases concretely? So it's 4, I said it, they are developed in 4 different countries. We have, for instance, in Spain, we have the municipality of Santander, and their use case is about market valorization of data that is generated in the public domain. We have Greece with the municipality of Kateryny. It's about transparent management of public accounts. And then we have Poland, which is actually not a Polish use case, but this is a pan-European use case, and this is about public funding distribution. So this is actually concerning all EU member states. Also, actually, the Commission, it's about cascade funding projects. So this is very interesting one, like all the others, of course. And then we have, last but not least, it's the Belgian one. I took that as last one, of course, because that's the presentation that we will have just afterwards. So this is about last mile logistics in smart cities. Now, I am a bit short about explaining these use cases. Why? Well, simply because we will have further webinars. So this is a national launch event for Luxembourg. We will have further launch events, and you will, of course, get more information in these launch events. So this is kind also of a teaser for you. So, and also to get you interested in these use cases and to invite you to join also our other webinars to get more information. But also to join our community. So you can be part of the token project. You can join the token platform. We have not only a website that will be updated in a more irregular way, but we have, most importantly, the token community, because that's where the action takes place. That's where you will find a lot of updates on the project, the latest news, and that's where you can directly interact also with others, share experience, learn from others, and yeah, learn about best practices. So I invite you definitely all to join the community. You see the link on the slide. You will see it later in later slides, and I will also put links in the chat that you can access that quite easily. So my last slide, in a nutshell, what is the token project? Well, it's very, put it in one word, it's an experimental ecosystem, so to enable the adoption of distributed ledger technologies and to prove the value via replicable use cases as a driver for transformation of public services towards an open and collaborative governance model approach. So there are a lot of components in that, and it's definitely something very exciting. With this, I also thank you for your attention. So this is the end of the first part of the presentation of token. It's not the last part, because now I will definitely immediately provide the floor, give the floor so to the next speaker. And this is, as I said, so the use case presentation from Belgium. So this is a presentation provided by IMEC from Belgium, and it's Juanita Davis who will speak. She's an urban designer researcher at IMEC. So Juanita, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tom. Hello, everyone. As Tom already said, I'm an urban design researcher at IMEC. In particular, I work in the part that is doing a lot of research about city and how we can use technology as a tool to address the different challenges that we have in the cities today. So in this context, my approach today to the presentation would be a little bit different. Just a moment, please. 1 second, that my presentation, I need to give permission to, okay, done. Okay, 1 second, please, because I had some issues sharing my screen right now. Maybe, Tom, you can share, because otherwise I have to restart everything.
Yes, just
as predicted, maybe we had a problem, so let me, no, now I'm able to do that. Perfect.
Okay.
So perfect, so here it is. So in this case, our approach was not only to think about blockchain use in the public sector, but was trying to understand the specific context and utility, thinking about the different actors that are involved in the implementation of this use case. So in this particular moment, one of the most interesting points right now is the issue of local food and local goods in the city, but also how the city is interacting with logistics. So when we started to think about this topic with the different people, different actors by doing interviews, we realized that maybe for this implementation, one of the most interesting part is to take a little part of this very complex logistic process, a little part of this very complex accessibility to the city, and take one city, which is the city of Leuven, which is, we are collaborating with them, and then basically they are interested in gaining more knowledge about how deliveries, but also how mobility works into the city. And also they want to know how local food engage into the city and how local products are working into the city. From the other part, we have this great interest in understanding logistics and how last mile logistic could be related to this project. And lastly, we have some farms around Leuven that are actually looking on how to find new ways into delivering food into the city, especially in this context of Corona, which everything has changed, but also in a moment in which we want to promote local food, but it's not quite easy to reach the local stores, but it's also very hard to access the city because there are really different regulations. So in this process, we define the goal of our use case. So the idea is to the dynamic access to the city and last mile food logistics. We want to investigate how to promote last mile deliveries and local economy in the city of Leuven by granting access to the city and also parking services based on sustainable practice. What does it mean, sustainable practice and parking services? So it means that we want to determine an index and a way in order to give more priority to certain actors or to certain modalities to access to the city. How? In this case, we want to use blockchain technology and its advantages such as transparency, distributed traceability, in a way that we can use this type of platform and elements to generate trust between the different partners, but we can also decide, or each partner can decide which type of information we want to share with the other ones. So the idea is also to break a little bit this traditional problem of logistics and the different actors in which everyone prefers to do things by paper instead of sharing the information. So the idea is generate this trusted environment in which the different actors can interact between each other, but also we can have an impact on the mobility of the city, which currently does not have many information about how logistics works into the city. So here you see the traditional case in which a delivery has a very complex chain. So the idea is also to link this form and this very short distance with the final user or consumer. So in this case, we started to think about the farmers, but we took the farmers just to take an example of what could be this in a specific case. So imagine that we have farmers here and we can collect certain data as pickup dates, if the food is organic, what is the cost, what is the location, what are the type of seeds. We can know what is the transport modality, the pickup day, the deliveries, the route, and the emissions that this type of delivery is given to. And what if the city, with this information, can actually promote the access to the city in different times for these actors based on what they are doing? So thinking about this, we started to think about all the cases and also about secondary players in which we want to see how all this system and all these interactions could benefit from the use of blockchain. So we have a lot of challenges here because we want to understand what is the quality, where we want to see if pricing could be something that we can address through this project. We want to better organize logistics, but also provide a bigger insight of how the logistic full process work into the city. We want to improve the matching of supply and demand. There is the challenge of management and administration, also the invoicing that we are investigating because we are not sure what are all the elements that we're going to use. The transparency for sure and then traceability are elements that probably will be key for the implementation of this project. And the last one is that taking all the information from the city farming, but local agriculture, but also local economy in order to understand how we can promote this. This is also an opportunity in the sense that blockchain has a lot of beautiful benefits, but also we want to support local economy. We want to have a transparent supply chain for the end consumer. We know that this could be beneficial for the food safety, but we need to investigate, and that's why we're doing interviews to understand exactly which points we want to go in deep with the different actors. We know that we can increase shop and food experience. And there is something that is really important right now, that is the city of Leuven and how this could relate to the city. So normally we separate all the topics, but in this case, it's very interesting to see how something like logistics and food delivery into the city could be deeply related to the mobility of the city and how this process could be improved. So we see this as an opportunity, but we see also this as an opportunity to start a conversation about how cities can be more sustainable and fit in the Leuven 2030 mobility plan and carbon-free plan. And also, we would like also to see how this could actually shape regulation, because right now regulation is very static. So if you think about accessing to the city center or accessing to the city, normally the regulations are you can enter to the city before 10:30 or you should pay this. So we want to think and reflect through this project about how the current regulations and how everything is working in order to rethink the way in which the city grant access not only to logistics, but this is the opportunity to start this reflection about accessibility to the city. Of course, there are many benefits that the token could bring, like token identity, smart contracts, stamping, or the data broker, with some specific benefits. So, for example, the ownership is something that I think that for each of the actors is really important. The certificate, the token stamping, I believe that is one of the most relevant here, because we thanks to the token stamping, we can actually see how sustainable, how the parkings could be reserved for the people who is delivering food. We can see how fresh is the food, but also how biological or bio is the food. And of course, the token identity, in which you can actually identify different parties, senders, receivers, and you can identify different goods and parcels and validate each of the actors. In this whole ecosystem, we also see a lot of benefits that could be derived from this project. That is the smart contracts, so security and traceability, the pricing, the quality label, in which we know where the product comes from, what is the quality of this product, and for sure this for the first time will be connected with the mobility and the access to the city. And last one, the promotion of the local economy and sustainable mobility, that I think that right now is becoming even more relevant than before because of the corona. So during the corona time, we saw that a different mobility is possible. We saw the importance of promoting local economy, of promoting local products. So I think that this is becoming every day a more and a more important element of this POC implementation. So one of the ways that we see this pilot case in Belgium is, as I mentioned before, is to generate together with the city of Leuven an index to understand what are the type of goods that should be promoted in the city and what are the type of access that should be promoting to the city. So think about, for example, how many miles your food has, what is the modality, so is your food delivered by foot, is your food delivered by bike, is your food delivered by trucks, or where your, what is the, is your food organic, or these type of things. We believe that having a complete picture about your food is an interesting way of access and giving some some preferential access to the city. So they will reduce costs that right now are one of the big problems for the city. So today, so in all of this implementation, we have a timeline in which we are now in the first part, that is the use case readiness, and this will go until the end of 2020. Next year, we are going to implement this use case, and in 2022. And in particular here, we determined 2 stages in which we want to investigate very deeply what is the current state, what are the current actors, and especially what are the current needs from the different actors in order to give a more detailed shape to the project. The second part, instead, based on the findings, is to define a very clear implementation plan for the next year. So today, we have been doing many different actions in order to be sure that we are taking the right decisions, we are selecting the right actors, and we are scoping the project in such a way that we are not just using blockchain for the love of blockchain or the technology, but we are actually creating relevance for each of them. So for that, we started with a scoping workshop with all the different potential partners to understand their needs, what are the challenges. Then actually we define a research plan in which we define all the different steps that we want to follow for the project. We are currently investigating all the reference and different work that has been done related to logistics and blockchain, but also related to food and access to the city and mobility. And we have created a stakeholder groups in which we have selected a different numbers of actors that we would like to be engaged and collaborate actively into the project. So right now we are facing a collaboration agreement, but also we are following a series of interviews with the idea of getting more deep insights about what is the scope and why it's relevant. Then actually we are working on the token requirements. This means that we want to be sure that our implementation will follow the scope of the project, that we will use the right technology, and that we will not face legal or privacy issues. And in August, we will present the user requirements reports for that. So here you can see one of the steps. So the scoping workshop was a very interactive event in which we engaged different actors. So for example, the city of Leuven, the VIL, which is the logistics organization from Belgium, IMEC, which I'm representing today, Linked Farm and Kortom Leuven, which are 2 organizations that promote local agriculture and local food, and the University of Cantabria. So here you can see what are the different elements and what is interesting for each of the actors here. So here you can see, for example, that the city of Leuven they want to get more insights about the mobility in the city. They would like to have a platform that is trusted by everyone. They are very interested in this connection between logistics and mobility into the city, and also sustainability, but also now that this is recent after this about, as I already said, about local products. Bill is very interested in understanding how the logistic process could work with less miles, with cleaner mobility, and how this could be optimized for more local actors. And now here in IMEC, we are always happy to investigate how technology can actually apply or address the different challenges of a city, but also we are very interested in learning, in translating the needs of the different users into a technology or a series of tools that can have a societal impact or an impact on the different actors. Linked Farm and Kortom Leuven are local associations, so they are really interested in understanding how they can add value. One has a platform and the other one is more interested in understanding how they can promote local foods. And the University of Cantabria is very interested in all the societal impact mostly. So here you can see we follow this really interesting process, which is Innovatrix, and we get into a series of findings. But also we proceed also with doing some interviews or getting some insights from the different actors. So here you can see that there are many different elements that are right now a problem. So for example, logistics right now is very expensive, especially in this case that for local food it could represent 20 or 30% of the cost. And farmers today, they prefer to distribute themselves because they see as a less expensive way. The not optimization of the delivery. So right now they have a local truck and they try to distribute trips, but that's why we are working with Bill and with logistical partners in order to see how we can optimize this process, because right now it's very expensive, also because they normally have to pay also access to the city in order to entry. They have a very limited amount of hours in which they can deliver to the city. Are not anymore used to pay deliveries, and these deliveries, because they are not really effective, tend to be very expensive. And then the other challenge is that people want to use reusables instead of having trash, but this is really hard right now. From the food producer, there are many challenges right now. So there is the monoculture approach right now to the subsidies. There is the Belgian clock pricing, which is a very complicated element, but basically the pricing is not determined by them, but by another series of process. The labels right now are not guaranteed, and it's very hard to verify if the information is correct or not. And the producers are facing big compliance cost. From the city of Leuven, we have a lot of interesting challenges. I think that the city of Leuven right now is very open to redefine the logistics and redefine the mobility. So at the moment, they have a lot of statistical data about how logistics works into the city. Actually, from what we have been learning, the economic department is doing a lot of research, but they are collecting data in certain periods of the year. And they would really like to get more knowledge about this process, what is the timing, and actually they see an opportunity in terms of redefining the way that they granted access to logistics. Also, dynamic access to the city, which is for them really interesting. So they want to open the windows, and these windows should be more dynamic. So this window should rely more in the traffic, in the current traffic, in the modality, and in the type of goods of miles. They are really looking forward to promote local food and local shops, especially after Corona, because as you know, many local shops or local food producers were very hit by this crisis, or things has changed a lot during that time. Dynamic parking is also a really interesting topic right now, because normally it's also a problem in most of the Belgian cities, but I think in every city around the world, that is when you are doing deliveries, you tend to block the sidewalks, you tend to block the roads. So they are looking forward to see if there is a way to promote this. And also, for sure, as a part of Leuven 2020 or 13, promote a more sustainable mobility, and they are looking forward to find a trusted intermediate actor that in this case will be the token implementation.
Juanita, sorry to interrupt, we have 2 minutes left.
Okay, I'm done. Yeah, sorry. So from the logistic parties, we have been doing a lot of research, especially Bill. So the idea is also to they have limited access to the city. There is no standard policies about how to access the city or who can access to the city. They have the same problems about searching parking spots, same problems about the small windows of access, and the inefficiency about having more trucks in the city, basically. So instead of having the optimization of trucks, because they have to deliver at the same time, they tend to have more trucks. For short chain, as I mentioned before, the cost is very high, and there are fragmented initiatives. The transport is not eco-friendly because there is not a clear organization for this, and short chain tends to be more polluting than normal supply chain because it's not optimized. And last, Linked Farm, which is one of the actors we are looking forward to communicate. They have the platform in order to connect farmers and final users. So they want to reduce the cost of delivery. They have a big fluctuation of orders. They have difficulties in searching parking spots, and then they want to organize a better system for deliveries and expand and improve their platform that right now is growing. And of course, the last one, but very important, is to understand how blockchain can improve actually their current processes. So I need to close very fast, but the idea is that token will be this actor, trusted actor in the middle, in which we can connect and provide the information that each of the actors need in order to do better their job and to connect better themselves, and especially to get access to the city. So you can see this, but here especially you can see one of the first sketches about the architecture, because our idea is that there will be this dynamic access controller and a mobile app this will be part of our development in our use case. And this will be connected to the work package one that is developing all the technology that will be used by the project. So you can see that there are many actors accessing by different APIs. And the idea is that, for example, the logistic partner get all the information that it needs to make the optimal last mile delivery. The city can understand immediately who should access to the city in which times, but also can report to the different actors in which moment will be ideal for them to deliver. But also the food provider will give other information, for example, about the quality of the products or the products that they are shipping or selling. And we foresee also a mobile app in which the actors that are not high technology skilled could interact with the token project and the token implementation. So here, as always, we have a beautiful team that is constantly growing. So that I have to say that it's really important to mention them, because thanks to them, we are organizing and we are growing in our POC every single day. So yes, you can see here some of the team, and yeah, we are looking forward to continue working and expanding our project and our implementation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juanita. Very sorry for the short interruption. I think this was indeed also very instructional. So we learned a lot about this project. And with this, now we will continue with the next part, which is already the final part of this webinar. It's the round table. So we have Jet Grant, who is a board member of Infrachain and CEO of KYC3, who will be the moderator of this panel, of this roundtable. And we have the participation of Patrick Weber, who is from the Ministry for Digitalization in Luxembourg. We have Renske Stumpel, who is program leader of another very interesting project, an Interact project, which is called Bling Blockchain in Government. We have Roxanne Faure, who is quite newly elected co-chair of the Public Sector Working Group of INATBA. We have Balazs Nemeti, who is the head of operations of the Decentralized Identity Foundation. And last but not least, we have another Infrachain member, and that is Carlo Harpes. He is the managing director of our member company, iTrust Consulting. I hope I had pronounced all your names correctly, and I'll leave the screen and the floor to Jet.
Thank you very much, Tom. Welcome, everybody. Good morning. Today, we're going to be exploring the impact of and governance of public sector blockchains in this roundtable. We have a very balanced group of panelists with skill sets that are quite diverse, so we should have some interesting discussion. The main challenges that we're going to be exploring are the legal, technical, and organizational constraints, and how they affect the situation when you have DLT and blockchain in a decentralized environment, how to sustain the financing, and how to organize the governance of such solutions. So without further ado, thank you for the introduction, Tom. You've saved me a few minutes, and we'll move straight to the questions. So to set the stage a bit, public sector blockchains seem in many cases to require legislative changes, because the current laws are set up with the assumption of a centralized governing body or government organization. And in order to achieve the promise of blockchain, which is trustless, decentralized ledgers, it would seem that some legislative changes ultimately will be necessary. But the question is really how to drive this innovation. Who should be behind the innovation, the executive branch, the legislative branch, or the private sector, or how should they collaborate? Patrick, could you please share with us your thoughts on that from the Ministry of Digitalization? You may be muted, Patrick. Is he still on?
Yeah, now you can hear me, sorry. So my name is Patrick Weber from the Ministry for Digitalization here in Luxembourg. And as most of you might know, we are running, and is already running, a public sector blockchain here for the public sector in Luxembourg. So this is very much a project that is born out of an idea of experimentation to kind of get experience with public sector blockchains and how we can use them in the public sector in Luxembourg. And it's a collaborative effort between Ministry of Digitalization and CTIE, so the government IT provider, but also Ziggy, so the communal sector IT provider, and Carlucci, who presented earlier, is representative of that. So it's a collaboration between different government agencies already and different government levels, and we're already running first use cases on it. So this question about legislative change, in my view, it's a bit early for that. We're still in the phase of trying to understand what can be done with blockchain technologies here in Luxembourg for the public sector, and to see if we find any stumbling blocks or any inhibitors that we could address through legislative change. But it is at the moment, as I said, a collaborative process. And this question, who should drive this legislative change if it needs to be, we also involve already private sector partners that will also potentially in the near future will run nodes of this public sector blockchain to participate in use cases fully. So it kind of envelops all the different partners that have been raised in question that could drive this legislative change. But I think it's a collaborative process of discovery of what needs to change to fully realize the potential of public sector blockchains.
Interesting. Roxanne, you've done some work on this space. You're from the private sector, but you've worked quite closely with the public sector. What's your experience on this?
So I'm from a public financial institution, so we're a bit in between.
Yeah.
Actually, in the financial sector, there are very strong regulations. So adaptations were needed in the legal framework to actually develop infrastructure on a industry level or in production. I think for the public sector, it might not be as closed, and we have more options to develop use cases or try new things within the existing legal framework. And as Patrick said, it will be probably a collaborative approach because the government and the executive part of our nations will be involved in transforming this framework that will be needed, especially on digital identity, probably. But for the rest, I guess it could be just a new service that's provided by public actors, and so it might not need such strong modifications at first.
Okay, interesting. Smart contracts are part of this architecture in the DLT space that's gotten a lot of attention, and people speak about them as if they're actual contracts. Although it's pretty clear that they are like stored procedures, they're code that executes on certain triggers. And computer programs have been established to be products rather than contracts mostly. Do you think that this will trigger some kind of revision of what computer code is? The question is, will we see legislation that actually makes engineers liable the way structural engineers might be, or architects for the code they produce. Balázs, I think you have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And hi, everyone. So I have a background in architecture, so I think I can help with the answer as well. And I do not think that's anytime soon is going to take place, because like there's a big difference between like real life engineering and coding and digital engineering is that like a structure is always unique, even if it looks similar to another system, while in the space of code, it's extremely easy to create replicas of the same thing and just like populate the digital space. So saying that like a smart contract is a legally binding contract, it might take place in extremely simplified contractual situations, but as it's real life, there are very few very simple cases, and most cases become unique very quickly. So creating a self-modifying smart contract that can react to those issues is maybe a little bit later, and we are not sure if we want to get there anytime soon. So
we're really at the beginning in your mind.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a good assessment. It's all about decentralization and public services in this case. So looking at how they could be improved through digitization. We've seen a lot of innovation triggered by blockchain, but blockchain might not actually be the silver bullet in the end of the day, but it might be a good wake-up call that has certainly drawn a lot of attention to improving public sector services. I think, Renske, you've done quite a bit of work. Some of your use cases are very interesting that you've worked on. How do you see this evolving with the application of blockchain? I think particularly interesting is the case you've done with vouchers, where blockchain has sort of waxed and waned in your use of it. What are your thoughts on the evolution of this?
Yes, well, I'm from the Blink project, which is a project about with 13 partners from North Sea countries working on blockchain solutions for services, customer services. So we are really one big sandbox environment, you could say. And the example you mentioned is about the Stadspas, which is a voucher system for people with lower incomes in the municipality of Groningen, situated in the north of the Netherlands. And well, that worked very successfully for a few years. We've now changed to a non-blockchain solution though, because well, that worked as well, and we've procured it with another IT provider, etc., etc. So things change, but we were really one of the few examples of an implemented use case in a municipal environment. So, and I really liked what the former speaker said about most use cases become unique very quickly. So I think that's a very true assumption, really.
Interesting. And the reason when you left blockchain, what were the strengths of the blockchain solution that you maybe had to leave behind? And what were the strengths of the new solution, the advantages that you gained by actually leaving the chain?
Yeah, well, at that time, the solution on blockchain was very good because the actual process of handling vouchers was really very, it involved a lot of manual work, paper being transferred, etc., etc. So at that time, the blockchain was really a big improvement on that. But yeah, well, things change, and it now turned out another just normal technical solution would work just as well. So we changed it, and I must say the time we experienced it, we piloted, was really the high. Well, when blockchain was the magic word for everything, which, well, now we're somewhat more back on earth, I would say. So that's mainly the reason. But we will write a small report in the Bling project about the reasons why we changed, because we think this is very interesting questions. And I really think it's the really experiencing in municipal settings or regional settings that really we need to share learnings and knowledge and not make same mistake twice, etc., etc. I think that would be one of the benefits from exchanging knowledge in these kind of projects.
Indeed, indeed, that's very valuable. I look forward to reading that. Personal info is one of the issues. When we see personal info in blockchains, people often end up with a clash on privacy. And then SSID or self-sovereign identity is something that comes in very quickly to the rescue, it seems, in many people's minds. Balázs, what are your thoughts on SSID and blockchain, and how do they go together? Some people think that they require each other. I think you have a different viewpoint on that.
Yeah, thanks. So just because we are talking with governments, I think it's better to use maybe the decentralized identity term and not SSI. It can lead to interesting conversation that not everyone wants to have. And essentially the answer is that blockchain have some tendencies and some features that can extremely empower certain identity functions. One is the ability to actually provably own certain pieces of the technology. When it comes to like complete ownership and complete sovereignty, do you completely own your phone? Can you own a piece of cloud infrastructure that you are running, even if it's encrypted? It's a very long discussion that comes to user experience and humans using services. But indeed, as you said, blockchains, if well implemented, can empower people with the use of decentralized identifiers on top. So basically, the part of the blockchain is only to provide global discovery and nothing else, not using the blockchain for registering transactions and any other functions, just providing the ability that I have a public key that I can prove that I used in certain settings, but all those settings are actually off-chain, not recorded, so you are not constantly leaking privacy onto the public infrastructures. When it comes to a private blockchain or not so public, the conversation changes. The question whether it's a blockchain comes up, and we can go into it if we want. I think that's a very different conversation, and let's just stay to public blockchains for now.
Interesting. Services, public services, a lot of people see them as universal, the services provided by one region or commune or even national government are similar to those of another. And a lot of people talk about wider infrastructure, multi-jurisdictional solutions from a technical, legal, and governance perspective. Does it make sense to actually consider such universal blockchain solutions rather than have smaller systems deployed that are more specific? I think your comment, Renske, on the earlier comment about use cases becoming specific is interesting. And Roxanne, you have some experience in this side. What are your thoughts on this type of systems?
It's a temptation to say that blockchain is very efficient to be a global infrastructure that could be used by anyone in the world. So that comes from somewhere, which is the first basics of public blockchains. I think for use cases in the public sector specifically, making, I mean, even if the European Union has been, let's say, unifying or making regulations that apply to all countries, we still have lots of specificalities. So it would be highly complicated and maybe not that useful to have a European blockchain, I mean, even less an international one, except for maybe specific use cases. And I think that's what EPSI has been developing. So for use cases that might be used in several countries at once, such as taxes on export, or I think they announced the new use cases, among which one on social security numbers that could be used across Europe, obviously. But yes, I think we have strong specificalities that will not make sense to have everything on only one, but as EPSI has been based on, interoperability should be pushed, because that will be a way to connect this type of services. So yes, definitely. But I mean, even a national blockchain would put down so many silos between administration, between sectors, between even regions where some administrative processes are different. So even in France, which is a super centralized country, we have different systems. For instance, to give some specific social providings to low-income people, but the process is different in different regions. So that could already be a very, I mean, the processes would have been much more unified on a national blockchain already.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. You mentioned interoperability. Patrick, what are your thoughts on this from the standpoint of the experience you have with Ziggy, tying different communes together and eventually looking at how that could even go bigger? Is it interoperability or scalability? What are you looking at most?
I think I can't speak for the Ziggy because I represent the ministry, but
Yes.
we obviously we work quite closely together. And here in Luxembourg, I think it makes sense to have both approaches. So on the national level, we have the public sector blockchain where we deploy several different use cases. So Ziggy has their use case running on it. And in parallel, the CTIE, the ministry, have different use cases, and we're developing more here with public sector partners. So these use cases coexist, even though at the moment they don't really interact with each other. So in that sense, we haven't had much experience of interoperability between different use cases even though they're running on the same blockchain. And as has been mentioned quite rightfully, there are different kind of interoperability frameworks for running on a blockchain to be able to, for this use case to be able to interact. For example, identity. If you have a common framework for identity for different actors and for establishing trust between different actors, like in the self-sovereign identity framework, if that's running, then it makes it much easier to connect these different use cases and then have interoperability between use cases. If they run on different blockchains or on the same blockchain, it doesn't really matter then, because it's interoperable and based on those standards. And that's also why we as the ministry, we support both the public sector blockchain running nationally in Luxembourg, which is one blockchain, but also we participate in the EPSI blockchain and in this infrastructure and putting on use cases on there that surpass Luxembourg as a nation state. For example, the diplomas use case is very interesting because obviously it's based on the standardization of European diplomas and certifications. It's nothing to do with blockchain, but it's a standard of how you describe a diploma or certification you get from a European institution, be it university or Chamber of Commerce or whatever. And to put this in a blockchain on this EPSI European blockchain, then it immediately becomes interoperable, especially with the self-sovereign framework, the ESIFs framework that also gets implemented. So it definitely makes sense then to have this interoperability. And what I find really interesting is with this self-sovereign identity standards that are coming out, this DITs, those disparate identifiers, and how this addressing works. You can mix and match different blockchains, but also different systems. So the address of where a verifiable claim can be trusted could be a blockchain, could be 3 different blockchains, it could be a different system altogether. There's nothing to do with blockchain, as long as they're there to the standards, that they are interoperable and can be integrated into a larger use case.
Absolutely. So we have different chains and interoperability and different layers on those chains. It can be very complicated to govern. Carlo, you've done a lot of work on governance with Infrachain and also on this project with the ministry and Ziggy. What's your experience and what have you learned about governing such multi-jurisdictional and multi-party decentralized solutions?
Well, we have learned that governance is very important. In Infrachain, it was a hot topic from the very beginning. Why? Because of the context of blockchain. Blockchain is difficult to understand. Blockchain has complicated technology, crypto, and if it's not right implemented, systemic risk. Blockchain has diverging principle from data protection. Data protection wants data to be raised immediately, blockchain want to keep them for eternal proofs. And finally, out of this comes a lot of misunderstanding on the technology and overestimation of what it can bring. So to avoid then risk, if you do project in this area, you really need a good governance. Our recommendation to anybody is, our technical advice is build a good governance from the very beginning. What is a governance? Well, a governance is where we define different boards, different committees. They have different role and responsibility, different activity. We need to define who decides on what and how we evaluate the performance of one or the other actors. Who are the different key stakeholders that we have to consider in our governance? Well, we had on one hand the business owner who discuss about profit and loss of projects. We have the asset owner, those who have the technical skills on the technology, who knows the IT system and everything to build. Then we have security experts, because all this is about trust. We cannot trust in a new technology, in proofs, if we do not have inherent security in it. And you understand that all these people talks different languages. And to make a success, they need to collaborate from the very beginning, because we want to create privacy by design. We want to build security by design. And if I add to this group lawyers or experts on data privacy, you understand that the discussion is even more complicated. But still, all these actors are needed to make a commercial success out of it. So once we have built this governance for Infrachain, we assisted the government in Luxembourg also to define their own governance. And now we are proud to do the same exercise with token, to help the token partners to build up their own governance. And I think this is the role that we can play, that we also play in our company, I Trust Consulting. We are on one hand consultant to help others to do their business, and on the other part, a technology provider where we participate to research with the aim to create something new, something innovative. And we need to bring all these ingredients together to build up really good new services. Thank you.
Indeed, governance is key, whether it's blockchain or another technology when you have so many parties involved. So the most interesting thing is the use cases. I think we have some very interesting ones in the token project with the different pucks. Are there any use cases anyone would like to share? And are there any questions from all of you? If you have any questions, please just plug them in the chat, and we'd like to get them to the panelists in the last 3.5 minutes we have. Renske, you had some other use cases as well that I found quite interesting, particularly the one that you're working on now.
Yes, we indeed have some very interesting use cases. We have a list of about 22 use cases in the Blink project, scattered across the 6 European countries who are part of the project. And I think we should get in touch with some of the things the token project does, because if we look at, for example, GeoPact, that's a use case that the University of Edinburgh and Cestron, one of our other partners in Edinburgh, is currently developing. And they are really into involving the public when designing these, tangible demonstrations. The project is about lock cases, which are followed, where they go from A to B. And they have, this whole difficult, intricate process to ascertain that a certain product really reached its destination. It's on urban logistics, and it's really a great project. And this week we will be publishing a publication. They call it a pictogram, I think, or something. Well, there's a lot of pictures and there's a lot of explanations in it. And I really think this is a great project because of the design aspects and the involvement with the public, which is rarely seen, I suppose, with blockchain. Because it's so difficult and the whole technique is so difficult to understand. So that's one of the things I would like to highlight here. And well, you can find it on the Bling website. So that's it for now. Do you want to know more or?
That's very interesting. How did you involve the public? You mentioned something in one of our conversations about how the public was involved, and you mentioned there was blockchain in one case. I think it was voting, and then there wasn't blockchain.
Yes,
this was a very interesting learning experience, I think.
Yes, that's a really small thing, really. That was voting on the blockchain, and that was about we did a small experiment when voting for the municipal elections, and we had a sort of a co-running process on blockchain whilst doing the real elections, because that's very tricky. And the national institutions were, well, they were a bit like, well, let's see. It's very, they were very excited at one part, but very concerned at the other points. So the project was really small. There was just in 5 election locals, there were election locations, sorry. They were testing with iPads, and we were asking the public. And when we explained to them it's blockchain, then they said, no, we would like to participate. If we said, without mentioning the word blockchain, we said, well, would you like to participate with this experiment? Then they said yes. So that was a really, sort of a trigger. I think people find it really hard to understand. And that's why I find the GeoPact pilot so fascinating, because they really focus on designing with the public. And they did so for a longer period. So that's maybe interesting to look at if you look at the pilot you're doing in the Leuven area. I think that would be very interesting.
So
Actually,
education and communication. Yes, go ahead.
Actually, I think that it would be very interesting to have a chat, Renske, because it's interesting always to learn about the other experience and how this experience can actually make our implementation grow. And from IMEC, maybe Joris can explain a little bit more, but we are really working together with the different actors. So we have a Living Labs, but also Innovatrix, which is a tool to understand what are the needs and how to convert these needs into actually elements of the project. So maybe Joris can explain a little bit more about this, but I think that is interesting because it's about giving meaning and translating the needs from the different users, companies, governments, into something that actually has a relevance in an application. So that's why. Maybe Joris, do you want to comment something?
We're running out of time. I think we have subject for another webinar, which I'd be delighted to organize with both of you, Anita and Renske. If there are any last words that any of the panelists would like to share, please do so now. Keep it short. We're a little over time. No? Great. Thank you all very much for being here today. It was really a pleasure. Thank you for your participation, and thank you all for listening. Back to you, Tom.
Thank you, Chet. Thank you to all our panelists. A very good discussion. Just seeing. Okay, no, I thought somebody else would be speaking, but so I'm speaking, no problem. Indeed, so this is the end of the webinar. I'm just following the chat also simultaneously because I see that there are also some chats. Okay, no, there are no questions. Okay, I don't know if we have Fabrice still with us.
Yes.
Okay, well then I hand over to you, Fabrice.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Tom. Thank you to all of you participating as a spectator, but also to all the speakers. It was a very interesting subject that have been explained today. And as you have seen, we strongly believe here in Luxembourg that blockchain will be a real enabler for more trust and more transparency in the public services. And thanks to the dynamicity of our leaders here, Carlo and the government, we have already deployed some concrete use cases and actively continuing to work on that. So if you need further information and if you want to get involved in the project, in the token project, there is a token website. The link is in the invite. You can follow token on social media because you have a Twitter and a LinkedIn account. And above all, you can and have to join the token community on funding spaces. And we'll continue the discussion, this discussion together on these networks. Don't hesitate also to follow the other national launch events that will be announced in the token community space in the following weeks and months. And to conclude, we also organize our third Infrachain Summit on November 10th here in Luxembourg. It will be physically, but also on a webinar seminar. It will be very interesting. Lots of interesting subjects will also be presented. So don't hesitate to follow Infrachain and to participate to this summit. Thank you again to everybody, and see you in following in another event, I hope.
Merci, Eddie.
Thank you to everybody. Have a great day.
Good day.
Thank you, everybody, for participating.
Thank